Sup, dudes? Today I'm in search of flavor, meatballs. The great American meatball, to be specific. We're going to look at how it came to be, what is the best cut of meat to use when making meatballs in your kitchen, why is the meatball so often paired with spaghetti, and some tips on how to make the best meatball in your kitchen. Stay tuned. I know when I was a kid and would visit Grandma's house with my brother, she always had meatballs on hand to feed us. She would take some of these magical creations and stick them on top of some spaghetti, ladle on the sauce, and dinner was served. I thought at the time that my brothers and I were like scarfing down good Italian eats courtesy of Granny. Turns out that wasn't exactly the case. The history of the American meatball is an interesting one. It all starts back in Italy, where the Italians had little meatballs called polpettas, and I apologize if I'm butchering that word. I don't speak Italian, and I don't pretend to speak Italian. So if there's anybody out there who does, polpette is my pronunciation for the word meatball. The meatballs in Italy are called polpettes, and they are much smaller than their American brethren and sistren. These meatballs can be as small as marbles, and depending upon where in Italy you are, they can be made out of a variety of meats, from anything from turkey to fish. Meatballs in Italy actually go back to the Roman Empire, and there's a lot of cookbooks from back then, going back even to the 4th and 5th centuries, that have variations on meatballs. So how did the American meatball, as we know and love it, come to be? Well, when the American immigrants were coming over on the boat to Ellis Island, when they got here, they had no muchachimo, no dinero, no dollars, no money. They were poor. So they needed to find something to eat, and that usually meant the cheapest and toughest cuts of meat. The cooks, being ever so creative, took the meat and decided to grind it down into chopped meat, and then started adding spices and cheeses to it to make it taste better. This was the first version of the American meatball, once they formed this into a ball of meat and cooked it. It wasn't really enough of a meal at the time, so they found something else that was incredibly cheap and abundant at the time, which was a noodle called spaghetti, and they married it together, put a little marinara sauce on top, and BAM! We had American spaghetti and meatballs. So that is the birth of the dish. Back in the day, they probably used just cheap cuts of beef. Nowadays, when we go to the Mega Mart, we have all sorts of options in terms of what to use in our meatball. Today, we're going to be using beef and pork. Those are the two kinds of meat that I like to use in my meatball. I do see a lot of recipes that include veal, and I have made it with veal in the past, but I do find that veal can be harder to find and it can be more expensive. So rather than paying extra money, let's just keep it on the cheap side and go with the beef and the pork. The meatballs are still just awesome. So one of the questions is, if we're going to use beef, we know that pork, we don't really have a lot of options in terms of cuts. We get ground pork. But in terms of beef, when we go to the meat counter, there are a dizzying array of options. There's steaks, ribeye steaks, there's filet mignon, there's chuck, there's all sorts of stuff. So what are we supposed to pick? What's a home cook to do? Well, we have an answer for you, and we are taking advantage of our new satellite hookup right down to the In Search of Flavor ranch in Texas, and we are going to hook up with Rancher Bob. Rancher Bob, you there? Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm here. Who I got to call daddy? What's your name, dude? Oh, my name is Eastwood. Clint Eastwood. What kind of a stupid name is that? Well, I actually thought it was kind of a cool name, but listen, that's beside the point. We have a question. We're up here trying to make meatballs, and meatballs? Well, doggy, why didn't you say so in the first place? I love me some meatballs. You get them all cooked up in the oven, and you get them finger licking good, and they're tasty, right? Good. They're tasty. Eat them all up. Did you eat them up? Yeah, well, we haven't started making them yet. We're talking about it, and just talking about it. It's just like you know to run your mouth and flap your gums all day long without getting anything done. I got a goat to milk. Get on with your question, dude. Come on, Bob. We just want to know, like, what is the best cut of meat that we can use to make our meatballs? What do you recommend for meatballs? All right, listen up, Eastwood. I'm only saying this one time, so listen close. Meatballs are generally made from the pieces of meat that are tougher on the steer, you understand? Not the tender parts, the tougher parts, the parts that do all the actual work. You understand what I'm saying? You understand, Eastwood? You reading me? Sure do. So, Eastwood, I whipped out my chalkboard, and if you look at my chalkboard and my drawing of a steer, you can see that the muscles that do the most work on this animal are the chuck primal and the round primal. That's essentially the two main groups that keep this critter up and walking around the barnyard, looking for other cows, hanging out, maybe going to get a drink of water, something like that, Eastwood, you understand? You understand? So those are the muscle groups that do the most work. That's why they say if you want to get a really tender steak, you go as far from the head or the hoof as possible. So that would put you somewhere in here in the short loin, tenderloin, rib steaks, things like that. That's really good eats there, Eastwood. That's good stuff in there, but not for meatballs, Eastwood, not for meatballs. Remember, meatballs, we're going with chuck and we're going with round. You follow me, Eastwood? You following? Yeah, so far so good. So remember, Eastwood, for good meatballs, go with ground chuck. That's what I would use, ground chuck. And I would look for something that's nothing more than 80% lean. That way you got some fat in there, you stick it in the oven, it'll cook it up, you get yourself some juicy meatballs. Woo! And you're gonna have yourself a meatball fiesta up there at Eastwood's house. We're gonna have a meatball fiesta, woohoo! Thanks a lot, Rancher Bob. You have helped us on our quest to get to the magical kingdom of meatball. Nice belt buckle. So, armed with our newfound knowledge from Rancher Bob, we know that we are going to need a ½ pound of ground chuck, 80% lean, just like you recommended. I'm doing a ½ pound each of ground chuck and ground pork. If you want to make more meatballs, just double the recipe. The recipe's down below. So, ½ pound of ground chuck. We're also going to grab our pork, ground pork, ½ pound of that guy. And while I'm in here, let's grab our buttermilk. I like to use the buttermilk in my panade. Fancy. And we're going to grab the Parmesan cheese and the eggs. We need an egg. Before we get started with the mixing portion of our program, let's go ahead and set our friendly neighborhood hot box to broil. Why broil, you ask? Well, we're going to want to cook these meatballs once we have them formed. Now, we could just take them and drop them into a pot of sauce and stew them, but I want to brown my meatballs before they ever meet the sauce. Obviously, the reason we want to brown them is to take advantage of the Maillard reaction and the luscious flavor that that provides us. I could just brown them on the cooktop in a Dutch oven with some oil in batches, moving them, turning them over, doing them in batches, but to me that seems like a lot more work, and there's another pot to clean up. If I wanted to make sauce, maybe I'd go that way, but that's another video. So I am going to go with broiling. It's easy, it's fast, there's almost no cleanup, and it gives us nice uniform browning. Broiling's the way to go. Okay, so let's review the ingredient list for our tasty meatballs, shall we? We have a ½ pound each of ground beef and ground pork. We have 2 slices of bread with the crust cut off and cubed. I have 1/3 of a cup of buttermilk, 1/3 of a cup of ground Parmesan cheese, 4 cloves of garlic, 1 teaspoon of dried oregano, 1 1/2 teaspoons of kosher salt, 1 egg, and parsley. The parsley, I find you can put as much or as little as you like. Sort of play with the recipe as you make it a couple times. You'll see where you put it into the food processor and grind it up with the garlic and just adjust it to your liking. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing we want to do is create our panade. So go ahead and grab your buttermilk, or if you're using regular milk, your regular milk, and pour it over your cubed bread. And go ahead and get yourself a large spoon, and what I like to do is just give it a good mix around. And then just set that aside so the bread can soak up the milk. Step 2 at our trip to the land of meatball is to go ahead and grab our garlic. That goes into the food processor, and then again, the parsley, as much as you like to use. Put on the top, give it a couple pulses. See what we have there. And then to that mixture, we are going to add our Parmesan cheese, our egg, and our oregano, and the salt. I like to do a couple of grinds of fresh pepper as well. Put on the lid, take it for a couple more spins. You can see now we have sort of a paste in there. And the panade is also going to go into the food processor. I put my panade in the food processor because I could mash it up with my spoon, but I don't like to find like real big bits of bread in my meatball, so I stick it in the food processor, process it a couple times, get a nice smooth texture. On goes the lid, and hit it. Looks good to me. Okay, so now grab your bowl of luscious raw meat. Let's bring our mixtures together. Now we're going to mix it together. The best tool for this is your hands, so keep them clean, or wash them if you haven't, and work the meat together gently. You don't want to really mush it in your hands. You just want to sort of pull it apart and mix your seasoning and panade in with the meat. Now I take a sheet pan that I have covered with a piece of aluminum foil and my disher, and it's time to make some meatballs. This disher is a number 30 disher. It says it on the swing arm right in there. If you ever look to see what disher you have. This is a number 30. I find it makes good size meatballs. So just reach in there, grab a big hunk of meat, roll it gently in between your hands, and place it gently on the sheet pan. Okay, so there we have our newly formed meatballs. Aren't they cute? So into the oven, this goes under the broiler. Set your timer for about 12 minutes and wait for the ringy dingy. I am going to do dishes while I wait. Oh, and there goes our timer. Time to don an oven mitt and get our meatballs. I think that's what we would call golden brown and delicious. So now really sky's the limit. We could take these guys, as I do, and eat them on a plate with a little bit of marinara sauce. We could get ourselves a sub, cut it in half, put a few of these guys on there, a little bit more sauce, some cheese, make ourselves a meatball sub. We could put these on a plate with some spaghetti to make spaghetti and meatballs. We could make meatball parmesan. We could slice these meatballs up and put them on top of a pizza. The options are endless for what we could do with these meatballs. So I'm gonna let them sit for a minute, and then we are gonna take the taste test, moment of truth, where we see what our meatballs taste like. Okay, moment of truth. Here we go. Whip out a fork. I think we have struck meatball gold, meatball nirvana. We've gone to the land of meatball and discovered big flavor. Do yourself a favor. Take this recipe, it's right down there, and make these meatballs in your house. They're really good. It will literally take you less time to make these meatballs than it took you to watch this video. And if you like this video, why not go ahead and give it a thumbs up? If it's your first time here or you really like the video, go ahead and subscribe. Why not subscribe? Because we have new videos coming all the time, at least one a week. And I wouldn't want you to miss anything that's coming on here and In Search of Flavor, because we have great stuff coming. And why not subscribe? Because this is a useful channel. You get all this great information, tasty recipes on how to make meatballs and banana bread and bacon and eggs and whatever other show we've done. So subscribe, and I will see you guys around the interwebs. I'm gonna go finish my meatballs, and until the next video, have a good week. Adios. Thanks to all you hombres out there on the interwebs watching this here video. Why don't you do us a favor and subscribe, why don't you? Because we got great stuff coming along. Hey, old Rancher Bob here. Maybe it's a future episode, you understand? So, I'll go ahead and subscribe.